Hi there, and welcome to We versus They. So, we versus they. Who is they? Well, they typically refers to management or ownership in the organization. Basically, someone that we might not feel like we are a part of, or someone that we might disagree with. They is a very interesting thing beyond simply being a pronoun. And I want to tell you that they is not someone you want to have in your organization. Let's talk about why. Let me explain what happens when I work with clients. Oftentimes, I will engage my clients' staff in conversations. When I work with a client, I'll typically do some interviews with their staff prior to coming on site to do training, to just make sure that the staff and the management and the ownership all are thinking and saying the same thing. They usually are not, by the way. That happens all over the place. So what happens is I'll have conversations with staff, and I am looking for certain things to come to the surface. In other words, when someone says they in a conversation, when they're referring to their manager or the ownership or the board or whoever it might be, I listen to how many times they say that. Now, I've gotten this down to such a science, that essentially what I do is I have my interview sheet and I have a little hash or a little line on that interview sheet that's followed by the word they. And what I'll do is I'll just write hash marks for however many times I hear they in the course of a short conversation. Now, a short conversation might be 15 minutes. But if I'm hearing that a lot, 5 times is a lot in a course of 15 minutes, then that tells me that there are some red flags. Because oftentimes it's used in a negative sense. It's used in a sense of blaming. It's used in a sense of creating some distance. It's used in a sense of disagreement. So those are issues. So in these conversations, I take notes. And then if I see, as I mentioned earlier, if I see any more than 5 come up, that tells me that there are some issues that need to be taken care of. And that happens very regularly. So the reality is that a client might hire me to come in and do service training, but the reality is they need management and leadership training or communications training. It's very revealing what happens. But let's talk about a couple of other things about we versus they. So what it reveals to me, other than the fact that maybe the needs are a little bit different, is that the staff person who is speaking in terms of the they rather than we when they're referring to their organization, it tells me that they feel disenfranchised. They're not a part of it for whatever reason. And I usually don't explore at that point. I usually will find things out unless the staff person wants to offer those things. But I never say, you're saying they a lot. What's that about? Because they oftentimes don't even realize they're saying it. So sometimes it comes out as negative. Sometimes it comes out as just really not meaning anything, but I want to pay attention to it and share how it can affect your organization right now. All right. It's a problem when it comes up. There are 3 reasons that it's a problem. Number 1 is that if your staff does not feel a part of the organization, there's a reason for it. You have to go back to see why. Perhaps there was a disagreement with their manager and the manager didn't handle it well. Perhaps the staff person feels like the manager, there was some wrongdoing, or the staff person feels like they contributed and the manager didn't recognize it, so that there's a little bit of a chasm. So that becomes a problem. There usually is a separateness when they occurs rather than we. So we need to pay attention to that. We need to understand that there is an underlying reason. We're going to talk about what to do about that in just a minute. It does need to be discussed, though. The second reason is that when a staff person doesn't feel that they're a part of the organization, it leaks out to members. And so that staff person will use they when referring to their manager or the ownership group or just the organization at large if they disagree with decisions that have been made or can't support or perhaps can't explain decisions that were made. They will use they to create distance between themselves so they don't look as though they are associated with that decision that they might disagree with or can't support. And so this does not present the organization in the best light. It might sound something like this. It might sound something like, when a member asks about a recent change, the staff person might say, Well, they decided to make this change because of blank, blank, and blank. Sorry. As opposed to, here's why we decided to make the change. We chose to make the change because of blank, blank, and blank, and we felt like that would be a better service to the members. I hope that's helpful. Are there any other questions that you have that I can help you with? Completely different perspective in terms of what that member walks away with and how they view that staff person. Now, the third reason that it's a problem is that if a staff person doesn't feel as though they're part of an organization, they are not giving their best to the organization. In fact, they might be giving their worst or taking from the organization. So these are real problems, and you have to be able to nip this in the bud. So let's talk about what we can do about it. Number one, I want you to really listen. Listen to your staff in conversation, both with them and when they speak with members. And see how often the word they comes up. We're going to talk about an exercise that you can do for this at the end of the program. But number one, just start by listening. Number two is be preemptive. And what I mean by being preemptive is when you're doing your onboarding, when you have new staff people come in, this becomes part of your training. So for example, you will explain to staff that there are certain things we say and certain things we don't say. For example, we never refer to management, ownership, other staff people as they. It's always we. Even if we don't understand something or perhaps disagree with it, we still support it as we. We never explain to members that it's they who made the decision. Because you want to explain to your staff, that creates a sense of separateness. It creates a disempowering nature for that staff person, and it makes them look as though they are not part of the team. You also want to explain that you will be listening for those things and how they should be speaking. So you'll be doing some training about this in your onboarding or your staff integration. So that's what I mean by be preemptive with it. And so you want to explain to them that this is key. Now, I'd like you to also view the program referred to as always and never, because in always and never, this would be one of those things that is on our always. We always use we, and we never use they. So this will help to really reinforce this lesson. Now, you may want to explain that there will be times where they don't agree or they might not understand, and it is incumbent upon that staff person to seek clarity if they don't understand something, rather than just saying, I don't know why they did it. That is not acceptable. So it's important for a staff person to seek clarity if they're not sure why something is happening. And if they disagree with something, that it is not appropriate for them to share that with members. So if they don't like a new policy, it is not appropriate to share that with members or guests by saying they did it because of this, in a very implicit type of way. All right. So what I'd like you to think about is if you hear they in a conversation, there's something we need to do about it. We need to correct it. We need to have the courage to confront and the willingness to correct. Especially if you have explained to your staff that this is not part of our organization. It's always we, it's never they. So when you hear it, you might want to have a conversation with your staff person. It sounds something like this. You might want to say, Bob, I was listening to you when you explained the new online court reservation system to Mr. Williams. And he had some questions about it, and I was a little concerned because of how you use the phrase, well, I'm not sure what's going on. They decided to do it this way. I know it can be figured out on the website. Do you need some help with this? Oh my God, would that be horrible if your staff person did that? That would be so horrible. So what you want to do, first of all, is you want to have a conversation with Bob and simply say, I'm concerned that you came across as though you weren't supporting it, or perhaps you didn't understand it. And I know we've talked about never using the terms they when referring to decisions or policies or anything that's going on in the club. So that came up. That was a big red flag for me. So can you share with me whether it's number one, there's some part of it that you disagree with, or you don't understand it, and I'm happy to help you with it so that we can make sure that we move forward and present it in the best light for both you and the member. That's the conversation that you would have. So that would be the reactive nature. We talked about being preemptive just a moment ago in terms of onboarding your staff and training them. But then the reactive nature is when your staff does say it, you want to be able to catch it. Courage to confront, willingness to correct. All right. So as we wrap up this program, what I'd like you to think about is that there are times when things are going along so beautifully at the club. And everyone seems to have bought into the vision. They've bought into the mission, the core values, and we're all moving forward, and you feel like you're a team until you hear that one little, well, here's why they do it. And then that's that little ripple that can make it all feel like, okay, we have a little problem here. And you do. So you need to address it. What I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to, after viewing this video, take a week and listen to your staff. Just listen. And have your interview sheet that maybe has the word they with a line after it. And you're just going to write down hash marks of how many times you hear your staff say they. And you're not necessarily going to attach names to it. You just want to know how many times it comes up in the course of the week. Then in your next staff meeting, probably 2 weeks down the road, you're going to say, hey, I did a little bit of espionage work. I'm trying to figure some things out here. And you will explain the whole concept of we versus they. You might go over this program with them. And then what you're going to do is say, I counted up all the theys that was said over the course of a week, and it blew my mind. Not in a good way. Or it blew my mind because we're not using it. That's great, you guys. Either way, you'll find out. But what I want you to do is create an awareness with them. And share this video with them, and you can also download the article that will be attached to this video. Have them read that, and then take another week and do the same exercise and see how much the use of the word they diminishes. And when you do that, you will find that you have a staff that is much better equipped to handle issues. They present the club in a much better light to members, and the level of trust goes up with members because they know that that staff person feels strong enough to be a part of the organization to be referred to as we. Thanks for listening.